The wind howled like a wounded beast as Elena Garrett felt her father's rough hands push her from the wagon, her body hitting the frozen ground with a force that knocked the air from her lungs. Snow swirled around her face, blinding and merciless, as she struggled to her knees and watched the only family she had ever known disappear into the white curtain of the blizzard, the wagon wheels leaving tracks that filled in seconds. "Please," she had whispered moments before, her voice cracking. "I did nothing wrong." Her stepmother's cold eyes had been the last thing she saw before the shove, that woman who had married her father 3 years ago and slowly poisoned his mind against his own daughter. Elena was 20 years old, strong and capable, but in this moment she felt like the scared child she had been when her real mother died of fever back in Kansas. They had been traveling from Denver to Trinidad, Colorado, a journey that should have taken them to a new start, a new life. Instead, her stepmother had finally convinced her father that Elena was a burden, that she was too willful, too outspoken, that she would ruin their chances at prosperity in the southern Colorado town where they planned to open a dry goods store. The cold bit through Elena's worn wool coat like teeth. She had only the clothes on her back, a thin dress beneath the coat, boots that had seen better days, and a bonnet that did nothing to shield her from the driving snow. Her fingers were already numb as she tried to stand, her legs shaking not just from cold but from the shock of betrayal. How could her own father do this? How could he leave her to die in a blizzard on this desolate stretch of mountain road? She took a step forward, then another, following the rapidly disappearing tracks. Perhaps if she could just catch up, perhaps he would change his mind, perhaps some shred of the man who had once braided her hair and called her his little songbird remained. But the wind pushed against her like a living wall, and the cold seeped deeper into her bones with each labored breath. Her vision began to blur, whether from tears or snow she could not tell. Time became meaningless. She might have walked for 5 minutes or 50. Her feet felt like blocks of ice, and she could no longer feel her hands. The world had become nothing but white and cold and the terrible sound of wind. When her legs finally gave out, she crumpled into a drift, and some distant part of her mind knew that this was how she would die. 20 years old, abandoned, frozen in the Colorado mountains in the winter of 1881. She thought she heard hoofbeats, but that seemed impossible. No one would be out in this storm. No one would be on this road. She must be hallucinating, her mind creating false hope in her final moments. The sound grew louder, and she felt vibrations through the ground where her cheek pressed against snow-covered earth. Then there were voices, or maybe just one voice, deep and urgent, Christ Almighty. Strong hands rolled her over, and through her frozen lashes she glimpsed a man's face, weathered and handsome beneath a snow-covered hat, blue eyes wide with concern. Miss, can you hear me?" She tried to speak, but her lips would not move. Her whole body was shaking now, violent tremors she could not control. "She is freezing to death, Gideon," another voice said, younger and higher pitched. "We need to get her to the ranch now." The man called Gideon lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all, and she felt herself being placed on a horse, felt his solid warmth behind her as he wrapped his coat around them both. His arms held her secure against his chest, and even through her confusion and cold, she registered the strength in those arms, the steady beat of his heart against her back. "Hang on, miss," he said close to her ear, his breath warm against her frozen skin. "I have got you. You are going to be all right. Just hang on." The ride was a blur of motion and increasing warmth where their bodies touched. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of his arms holding her tight, his voice murmuring reassurance, and the gradual slowing of the wind as they descended from the exposed mountain road. When she next opened her eyes with any real awareness, they were inside somewhere warm, and she was being lowered onto something soft. "Maria," the man called out. "Maria, I need help," a woman appeared, older with kind eyes and streaks of gray in her dark hair. She spoke in rapid Spanish, then switched to English. "Bring blankets, hot water, everything. Thomas, stoke that fire higher." Elena felt hands removing her frozen boots, her wet coat, and she tried to protest but could not form words. The woman, Maria, spoke in soothing tones. "Hush now, child. We must get you warm. These wet clothes will kill you." More blankets, impossibly soft and warm, were wrapped around her. Someone held a cup to her lips, and she tasted something hot and sweet, honey and whiskey maybe, and the liquid burned down her throat but brought blessed warmth to her center. Gradually, painfully, feeling began to return to her extremities, and with it came pain sharp enough to make her gasp. "That is good," Maria said. "The pain means you still have feeling. You may keep all your fingers and toes if we are blessed." Time passed in a haze. Sometimes she was aware of Maria sitting beside her, rubbing warmth back into her hands and feet. Sometimes she heard men's voices speaking in low tones from another room. Once she woke to find the blue-eyed man, Gideon, standing at the foot of the bed with his hat in his hands, his face drawn with concern as he watched Maria work. "Will she make it?" he asked quietly. "God willing," Maria replied. "She is strong, this one, I can feel it." But it was very close, Gideon. Another hour and we would be digging a grave. "Thank God we took the mountain road back from Trinidad," he said. "If we had stayed in town another night—" "Providence," Maria said firmly. "God put you where she needed you." It was 2 days before Elena could sit up fully and take solid food, before the terrible shaking stopped, and her mind cleared enough to understand what had happened. She was in a ranch house, well built and sturdy, in a bedroom that was simple but clean. Through the window she could see snow-covered fields stretching toward mountains in the distance. The storm had passed, leaving everything crystalline and bright under a pale blue sky. Maria came in carrying a tray with soup and bread. "Ah, you are truly awake now," she said with a warm smile. "Good. You had us worried, child." "Where am I?" Elena's voice came out as a rasp. "The Veigar Ranch, about 15 miles north of Trinidad. My son Gideon and his brother Thomas found you on the mountain road during the storm." Elena's memory returned in a rush. The betrayal, the cold, the certain knowledge that she was going to die. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Maria set down the tray and gathered her into a motherly embrace, letting her cry without questions or judgment. When the tears finally subsided, Elena pulled back and wiped her face with the back of her hand. "I am sorry. You saved my life and here I am weeping all over you." "Nonsense. You have been through something terrible. Anyone can see that." Maria handed her a handkerchief. "When you are ready, you can tell us what happened. For now, you need to eat and regain your strength." The soup was rich and flavorful, beef with vegetables and herbs, and Elena realized she was ravenous. She ate every drop and half the bread before she felt human again. Maria watched with approval, then helped her into a sitting position with pillows propped behind her back. "The men will want to see that you are recovering," Maria said, "but only if you feel strong enough." Elena nodded. She owed these people her life. The least she could do was thank them properly. Maria left and returned moments later with 2 men. The first was the one from her fragmented memories, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair and those striking blue eyes. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a face that was handsome in a rugged way, strong jaw shadowed with stubble, and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily though it was serious now. He wore simple ranch clothes, a blue shirt and dark pants with boots, and he turned his hat in his hands as he approached the bed. The second man was younger, maybe 22 or 23, with similar features but lighter coloring and a more boyish face. He grinned when he saw her awake. "Miss, I am mighty glad to see you looking better," the younger one said. "I am Thomas Vega, and this is my older brother Gideon." Gideon stepped closer, his eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her heart flutter despite her weakened state. "How are you feeling, miss?" "Thanks to you, I am alive," Elena said quietly. "I do not know how to repay such a debt." "There is no debt," Gideon said firmly. "Any decent person would have done the same." "Not any person would have been out in that storm," Elena countered. "What were you doing on that road?" "We had been in Trinidad buying supplies," Thomas explained. "We usually take the valley road back, but Gideon had a feeling we should take the mountain way. Said something just told him to go that direction." Gideon shot his brother a look that suggested he had said too much, but Elena felt something shift in her chest. Providence, Maria had called it. Maybe it was. "I am Elena Garrett," she said, deciding they deserved to know who they had rescued. "And I was left there to die by my own father and stepmother." The words hung in the air like stones. Thomas's mouth fell open, and Maria made a small sound of distress. But it was Gideon's reaction that caught Elena's attention. His jaw tightened, his eyes flashed with anger so fierce it was almost frightening, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "They abandoned you." His voice was low and dangerous. "In a blizzard, deliberately," Elena nodded, finding that once she started talking, she could not stop. The words poured out of her, the whole sorry tale. Her mother's death when she was 17, her father's remarriage, her stepmother's growing cruelty and manipulation, the slow turning of her father's heart against her. The journey from Denver, the accusations that Elena was ungrateful and disobedient, and finally the moment when her stepmother convinced her father that Elena would ruin their new start, that she had to be left behind. "He pushed me out of the wagon," she said, her voice breaking. "I begged him not to, but he would not even look at me. He just drove away and left me there." Gideon sat down on the edge of the bed, propriety forgotten, and took her hand in his much larger one. The gesture was familiar, perhaps too familiar for strangers, but Elena found comfort in it. His hand was warm and calloused from ranch work, strong and steady. "You listened to me," he said, his voice intense. "What they did was evil. You did nothing to deserve it. Nothing. And you are safe now, do you hear me? You are safe, and I swear to you that no one will hurt you while there is breath in my body." The certainty in his voice, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, made something warm bloom in Elena's chest, despite everything she had been through. She barely knew this man, but she believed him. More than that, she felt something stirring that had nothing to do with gratitude, though she pushed that feeling aside. It was too soon, too complicated. "Thank you," she whispered. "What will you do?" Maria asked gently. "Do you have other family, friends in Trinidad?" Elena shook her head. "No one. My mother's family was back in Kansas and I lost touch with them years ago. I have no money, nothing but the clothes I was wearing." The reality of her situation hit her then, the complete helplessness of her position. She had nothing, no one, nowhere to go. "Then you will stay here," Gideon said immediately, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "I cannot impose on your hospitality forever," Elena protested. "It is not an imposition." Gideon's thumb rubbed across her knuckles, and she wondered if he even realized he was doing it. "We have room, and God knows we could use help around here. Maria does too much as it is." "I could work," Elena said quickly, seizing on the idea. "I can cook, clean, sew, tend animals. I worked hard on our farm in Kansas before my father sold it. I can earn my keep." Maria smiled. I am sure we can find plenty for you to do once you are fully recovered. But for now, you rest and heal. That is your only job." Over the next week, Elena did rest, though she chafed at the inactivity. Her strength returned gradually, and with it came a better understanding of the household she had landed in. The Veiger Ranch was a cattle operation, medium-sized but prosperous, run by Gideon and Thomas since their father's death 5 years prior. Their mother Maria had been born in New Mexico when it was still Mexican territory, and she had married an American rancher who had respected her heritage and taught their sons to do the same. They ran about 200 head of cattle, had half a dozen ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, and supplied beef to Trinidad and smaller towns in the area. Gideon, Elena learned, was 29 years old and had never married, though not for lack of female interest according to Thomas, who liked to tease his older brother. He was serious and hard-working, up before dawn every day and often not done until well after dark. But Elena also saw his gentler side in how he treated his mother with deep respect, how he was patient with the younger ranch hands, and how he checked on Elena every evening without fail, sitting beside her bed and talking with her about everything and nothing. Those evening conversations became the highlight of Elena's days. Gideon would come in after washing up from the day's work, his hair still damp, and settle into the chair beside her bed. He asked about her life before, really listened when she talked about her childhood in Kansas, her mother's love of singing, her dreams of maybe teaching school someday. And he told her about the ranch, about growing up in Colorado territory, about the hard year when they nearly lost everything during a drought, and the pride he felt in keeping his father's legacy alive. "Papa always said this land was worth fighting for," Gideon said one evening, his eyes distant with memory. "He used to bring us up to the high pasture and show us the mountains and say that this was God's country and we were blessed to work it." "You must miss him," Elena said softly. "Every day, but I like to think he would be proud of what Thomas and I have done with the place." Gideon looked at her then, really looked at her, and Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What about you? What do you want, Elena, if you could have anything?" No one had asked her that in so long. Her father had stopped caring what she wanted years ago, and her stepmother had only ever wanted her gone. Elena thought carefully before answering. "I want to belong somewhere," she said finally. "I want to wake up in the morning and know that I am where I am supposed to be, with people who want me there. I want to matter to someone." Gideon reached out and took her hand, as had become his habit during these talks. "You matter," he said quietly. "You matter to me." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning that neither was quite ready to examine. Elena's heart raced, and she saw something in Gideon's eyes that made her breath catch. But then he cleared his throat and released her hand, standing up abruptly. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice gruff. "Maria wants you up and about tomorrow if you feel strong enough." After he left, Elena lay in the darkness and pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart still pounding. It was too soon to feel this way. Too foolish to think that a man like Gideon Veiga could care for someone like her, a woman who came with nothing but trouble and loss. But she could not deny the warmth that spread through her whenever he walked into the room, or the way she found herself listening for his footsteps, or how safe she felt when he looked at her with those blue eyes. She was falling in love with her rescuer, and she had no idea what to do about it. By the end of the week, Elena was up and insisting on helping around the house despite Maria's protests. She started with small things, helping prepare meals, mending shirts that had been sitting in a basket waiting for attention, sweeping floors. Maria finally relented when she saw that Elena genuinely wanted to help, that she needed to feel useful. "You are stubborn," Maria said with a smile as they worked together making bread. "That is good. Stubborn women survive out here." "I survived being left to freeze," Elena said, punching down the dough with perhaps more force than necessary. "I can certainly survive kneading bread." They fell into a comfortable rhythm, and Elena found herself genuinely enjoying Maria's company. The older woman told stories about the early days of the ranch, about Gideon and Thomas as boys getting into mischief, about the challenges of making a life in this rough country. She also, in her subtle way, talked about Gideon's character. "He has always been the responsible one," Maria said. "Even as a boy, he took care of everyone else before himself. After his father died, he was only 24, but he stepped into that role like he had been born for it. He saved this ranch with his hard work and his good sense." "He seems like a good man," Elena said carefully. Maria gave her a knowing look. "He is, and he deserves a good woman, though he has never found one who suited him." She paused meaningfully. "Until perhaps now." Elena felt her cheeks burn. "Maria, I have only been here a week. He saved my life, that is all. He was being kind." "I have seen how he looks at you, child. And I have seen how you look at him. I am old, not blind." Before Elena could respond, the kitchen door opened and Gideon himself walked in, along with Thomas and 3 of the ranch hands. They were all covered in dust and looking exhausted. "Something smells amazing," Thomas said, heading straight for the stove where a pot of stew was simmering. "Wash first," Maria commanded, swatting at him with a towel. "All of you, wash up before you track half of Colorado through my clean kitchen." The men retreated good-naturedly, and Elena found herself laughing at their antics. When they returned, clean and ready to eat, she helped Maria serve up the meal. They all crowded around the big kitchen table, and Elena was struck by the sense of family, of belonging that permeated the room. This was what she had been missing, what her father's house had stopped being years ago. She caught Gideon watching her from across the table, and when their eyes met, he smiled. It was a full, genuine smile that transformed his whole face, and Elena felt her heart do a small flip in her chest. She smiled back, unable to help herself. After dinner, as had become their custom, Gideon found her in the parlor where she was working on mending. He settled into the chair across from her, stretching out his long legs with a sigh. "Long day?" she asked. "We were moving cattle to the south pasture. One of the calves got himself stuck in a gully and it took 4 of us to get him out." He watched her hands as she worked, her needle flashing in the lamplight. "You are good at that. My mother taught me." She could make anything beautiful with just needle and thread. Elena tied off her stitching and set the shirt aside. "Gideon, I need to talk to you about something." His expression became alert, almost wary. "All right." "I cannot stay here indefinitely without contributing more than just household chores. I need to earn real money, to save so that eventually I can make my own way. I was thinking maybe I could find work in Trinidad, perhaps as a seamstress or in one of the shops." Gideon's face darkened. "You want to leave?" "I do not want to," Elena said honestly. "But I cannot be a burden on you and your family forever." "You are not a burden." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes intense. "Elena, I meant what I said. You are welcome here for as long as you want to stay. There is plenty of work if you want it. Maria could use real help, not just with the house but with the books. Papa always had her keep the ranch accounts, and she has been teaching me, but neither of us is particularly good with numbers. If you can read and write well, that would be worth wages right there." "I can keep accounts," Elena said slowly. "My father had me manage his farm books before he remarried. Then there you go. You would be earning your keep and then some." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I do not want you to go to Trinidad. The town can be rough and your father and stepmother are there. What if you ran into them?" Elena had not let herself think about that possibility, but now that he mentioned it, cold fear washed over her. What would her father do if he saw her alive? Would he be relieved, or would her stepmother convince him that Elena's survival was somehow a threat to them? "You are right," she admitted. "I had not considered that." "Stay here," Gideon said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice. "Please, we want you here." The way he corrected himself did not escape Elena's notice. She met his eyes and saw the truth there, the feelings he was trying to keep controlled, and her breath caught. This strong, capable man had feelings for her. Real feelings, not just pity or protectiveness. "I will stay," she said softly. "For as long as you will have me." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that this was about more than just employment or charity. Gideon stood and crossed to where she sat, then did something he had not done before. He reached down and tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I am glad," he said, his voice low and rough. Then he seemed to catch himself and he stepped back. "I should let you get to bed. Good night, Elena." "Good night, Gideon." After he left, Elena sat for a long time in the quiet parlor, her hand pressed to her cheek where he had touched her, and allowed herself to hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and growing contentment. Elena took over the ranch accounts and discovered that she had a real talent for organizing the books. She found several errors that, when corrected, showed the ranch was actually more profitable than they had thought. Gideon praised her work effusively, and she glowed under his approval. She also took on more of the household management, working alongside Maria in a partnership rather than as help. They preserved vegetables for winter, made candles and soap, and began planning what they would plant in the kitchen garden come spring. Elena had not felt this useful, this needed, since before her mother died. But more than the work, it was the daily interactions with Gideon that made her heart sing. He found excuses to be near her constantly. He would come in from the range and head straight to the kitchen where she was working. He sat beside her at every meal. He taught her to ride using his gentlest mare, his hands steadying her waist as he helped her mount, his voice patient as he explained how to hold the reins. One particularly beautiful afternoon, he took her up to the high pasture he had told her about, the place his father had loved. They rode side by side through meadows still brown with winter but showing the first hints of green, climbing up into the foothills until they reached a spot where they could see for miles. "This is it," Gideon said, dismounting and helping her down. "This is what Papa wanted us to see." The view was breathtaking. Mountains rose in every direction, their peaks still white with snow, and the valley spread below them like a patchwork quilt. The sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at, and the air was crisp and clean. "It is beautiful," Elena breathed. He used to say that if you could not feel God in a place like this, you could not feel Him anywhere. Gideon stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I come up here when I need to think, when I need to remember what matters." Elena turned to look at him, at his strong profile, the way the wind ruffled his dark hair, the serious set of his mouth. "What do you think about?" He met her eyes, and the intensity there made her knees weak. "Lately, I think about you," her heart hammered in her chest. "Gideon." "I know it has only been a few weeks," he said, the words tumbling out as though he had been holding them back too long. "I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you probably need is me complicating things. But I cannot help how I feel, Elena. From the moment I saw you in that snow, something in me just knew. You are supposed to be here. You are supposed to be part of my life. Part of this." He gestured to the land around them. "Part of yours," Elena whispered, remembering words he had said in her fevered state, words she had not been sure were real or imagined. "Yes," he said fiercely. "You are part of mine now if you want to be. If you could ever feel the same way I do." In answer, Elena stepped forward and placed her hand on his chest, feeling his heart pounding as hard as her own. "I feel the same way," she said. "I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was too soon, too complicated, but I cannot help it either. When I am with you, I feel like I have finally come home." Gideon made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and then he was cupping her face in his hands and kissing her. It was tentative at first, gentle, giving her every chance to pull away, but Elena had no intention of pulling away. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the feeling that had been building in her since the day he saved her life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is too soon, I know you need time, but I am asking anyway. Marry me, Elena, be my wife, my partner, help me build something here." Joy flooded through Elena so intensely she felt lightheaded. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Elena felt like she was flying. This man, this good, strong, honorable man loved her, wanted her, chose her. Just weeks ago she had been dying in the snow, discarded and unloved. Now she was being asked to become part of something beautiful, something lasting. When they finally pulled apart, Gideon was grinning like a boy, all his usual seriousness gone. "We should head back and tell Mama. She's going to be insufferable about being right." "Right about what?" "She told me 3 days after we brought you here that I was going to marry you." He laughed at Elena's expression. "She said she saw it in the way I looked at you, like you were the answer to a question I had been asking all my life." Elena thought about Maria's knowing looks, her pointed comments, and started laughing too. "She told me you deserved a good woman. I think she was matchmaking. God bless her for it." Gideon took Elena's hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Come on, future Mrs. Vega. Let us go home." Home. The word had never sounded so beautiful. Maria did indeed crow about being right, and Thomas whooped and picked Elena up in a bear hug that left her breathless. The ranch hands congratulated them with genuine warmth, and that evening they had an impromptu celebration with music and dancing. One of the hands played fiddle, and Gideon swept Elena around the kitchen in a clumsy but enthusiastic waltz that had everyone laughing. That night, after the festivities died down and everyone else had gone to bed, Gideon and Elena sat together on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. Stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, more stars than Elena had ever seen. "When do you want to get married?" Gideon asked, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "Soon," Elena said. "I do not want a big wedding, just something simple. Is there a church in Trinidad?" "There is, and a good priest. Father Miguel married my parents." He paused. "We will have to go into town for the ceremony. Are you ready for that? For the chance you might see your father." Elena had been thinking about this. Part of her hoped she would see him, that she could show him she had survived, that she had found happiness despite what he had done. But another part of her, the part that was still wounded and raw, feared the confrontation. "I will have you with me," she said finally. "That makes me brave enough for anything." Gideon tightened his arm around her. "Always. I will always be with you." They set the date for 3 weeks away, which gave Elena time to make herself a simple but pretty dress with Maria's help, and for word to spread among Gideon's friends and the neighboring ranchers. The Vega family was well respected in the area, and people were curious about the woman who had finally caught Gideon's heart. The days passed in a happy blur. Elena threw herself into preparing for the wedding and for her new role as Gideon's wife. Maria taught her the particulars of running a ranch household, the rhythms of the seasons, how to manage supplies for both the family and the hands. Elena absorbed it all eagerly, determined to be a true partner to Gideon in every way. Her relationship with Gideon deepened with each passing day. They stole moments together whenever they could, walking in the evenings, sitting together after dinner, talking about their dreams for the future. Gideon wanted to expand the herd, maybe buy the adjoining property if it ever came up for sale. Elena wanted to start a small school for ranch children in the area, maybe hold classes a few times a week. They talked about children of their own, about growing old together on this land they both loved. "How many children do you want?" Elena asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Gideon considered. 4 or 5, maybe, a houseful. I want sons to help run the ranch and daughters to wrap me around their little fingers. He grinned. Though knowing my luck, the daughters will end up being better at ranching than the sons. What about you? How many do you want? As many as God blesses us with, Elena said softly. I want a big family, Gideon. I want this house full of love and noise and life. I want our children to always know they are wanted, that they belong. He pulled her close and kissed her temple. They will, I promise you that. Our children will never doubt for a moment that they are loved. Finally, the wedding day arrived. It was a beautiful early March morning, cold but clear, with hints of spring in the air. Elena dressed in her new gown, a simple design in pale blue wool with lace at the collar and cuffs. Maria had given her a silver comb that had belonged to Gideon's grandmother, and she wore it in her dark hair along with a few early wildflowers Thomas had somehow found. You look beautiful, Maria said, her eyes misty. Like a bride should look, happy. I am happy, Elena said, and it was true. She was so happy she felt like she might burst with it. They traveled to Trinidad in the ranch wagon, with Thomas driving and making jokes the whole way to cover his own emotion. As they entered the town, Elena felt her stomach clench with nerves. Trinidad was bigger than she had expected, a bustling town with a main street full of shops and businesses, miners and cowboys and families going about their business. Their store should be on this street somewhere, Gideon said quietly, his hand finding hers. You want to see it? Elena shook her head. No. They made their choice and I have made mine. I have no need to see them. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As Thomas pulled the wagon up in front of the church, Elena saw a man and woman emerging from the dry goods store across the street. Her father, looking older than she remembered, and her stepmother, dressed in fine new clothes that suggested their business was prospering. Elena froze, her hand clenching on Gideon's. Her father glanced their way, and for a moment their eyes met across the street. She saw shock register on his face, then something that might have been shame before his wife said something sharp and pulled him back toward the store. Elena, Gideon's voice was concerned. Are you all right? She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. Her father had seen her, alive and well and about to marry a good man. That was enough. She did not need his approval or his apology. She had something better now. I am fine, she said firmly. Let us go get married. The church was small and beautiful, with wooden pews worn smooth by generations of worshippers and simple stained glass windows that cast colored light across the floor. Father Miguel was an older man with kind eyes and a warm smile, and he greeted them with genuine affection. Gideon, my boy, I thought this day would never come, he said, clasping Gideon's hand. And this must be your Elena. Welcome, my child. A handful of people had gathered for the ceremony. A few neighboring ranchers and their families, some of Gideon's friends from town, the ranch hands dressed in their Sunday best. It was small and intimate and perfect. When Father Miguel began the ceremony, Elena felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, standing beside this man, promising her life to his. When Gideon said his vows, his voice was strong and clear, his blue eyes locked on hers. I, Gideon Vega, take you, Elena Garrett, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You are part of me now, and I am part of you, and nothing will ever separate us. Elena's voice shook with emotion as she said her own vows. I, Elena Garrett, take you, Gideon Vega, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you, and build a life with you. You saved me in more ways than one, and I will spend the rest of my life thanking God that you found me in that snow. When Father Miguel pronounced them man and wife and told Gideon he could kiss his bride, the kiss was sweet and chaste, appropriate for church, but full of promise for the future. The small congregation applauded, and Maria was openly weeping with joy. They had a simple celebration afterward at a restaurant in town, with good food and laughter and toasts to the happy couple. Elena felt like she was glowing from the inside out, and every time she caught Gideon's eye, he was looking at her with such love it made her heart ache in the best way. As they were preparing to leave, Elena saw her father standing across the street again, just watching. This time he was alone, his face full of an emotion she could not quite read. She expected to feel anger or pain, but instead she felt only pity. He had thrown away his daughter for a woman who clearly cared nothing for him, and now he would live with that choice. Elena had a new family now, people who truly loved her. On impulse, she raised her hand in a small wave. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. I survived, the gesture said. I am happy. You could not break me. Then Gideon helped her into the wagon and they headed home to the ranch, to the beginning of their life together. That night, in the bedroom that was now theirs, Gideon was gentle and patient with Elena's innocence, taking time to make her comfortable, to show her the physical side of the love they had declared. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Elena felt complete in a way she never had before. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I love you too, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. My wife, my Elena. You're Elena, she agreed, and fell asleep in his arms with a smile on her face. The weeks turned into months, and Elena settled into married life with ease and joy. She managed the household and the accounts with skill, earning the respect of the ranch hands and Gideon's business associates. She and Maria became not just mother and daughter-in-law but true friends, working together to make the ranch run smoothly. Her relationship with Gideon grew deeper and richer with each passing day. They were partners in every sense, discussing ranch business over breakfast, working side by side when needed, and spending their evenings talking and dreaming together. The physical side of their marriage brought them closer still, and Elena found joy in the intimacy they shared, the way Gideon could make her feel cherished and desired with just a look or a touch. By late summer, Elena began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling anyone, hugging the secret to herself and watching for signs. When she finally missed her second monthly cycle and began feeling nauseated in the mornings, she knew for certain. She told Maria first, needing a woman's confirmation and advice. Maria hugged her with tears of joy and immediately began planning, talking about cradles and baby clothes and all the things they would need. Then, that evening, Elena told Gideon. They were in their room preparing for bed when Elena took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. There is a baby in here, she said softly. Our baby. You are going to be a father. Gideon's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally pure joy. He dropped to his knees in front of her and pressed his face against her stomach, his arms wrapping around her waist. A baby, he said, his voice muffled and thick with emotion. "We made a baby." Elena ran her fingers through his hair, her own eyes wet with happy tears. "Are you happy about it?" He looked up at her and she saw that his cheeks were wet. "Happy does not begin to cover it. Elena, you have given me everything. A home, a real home, not just a house. Love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall and into winter. Elena remained healthy and active, though Maria and Gideon both fussed over her constantly, trying to make her rest more than she wanted to. By December, she was showing clearly, her belly swelling with the life inside her, and she felt the baby move for the first time just before Christmas. "Gideon, give me your hand," she said excitedly one evening. She pressed his palm flat against her belly and they both waited. Then it came, a small flutter like butterfly wings against his skin. "That is our baby," she said, watching his face. "That is our child saying hello." Gideon's expression was one of complete awe. "Hello, little one," he said, speaking to her belly. "This is your papa. I cannot wait to meet you." They spent Christmas at the ranch with Maria and Thomas, a warm and joyous celebration full of good food and laughter. Elena felt the baby move throughout the day, as though he or she was celebrating too, and she had never been more content. As winter deepened, Elena sometimes thought about the blizzard that had nearly killed her, the snow that had almost been her grave. Now, watching snow fall gently outside the window while she sat warm and safe by the fire with Gideon's hand on her belly, she marveled at how much her life had changed. From abandoned and left to die to cherished wife and mother-to-be. From having nothing to having everything that mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Gideon asked, noticing her distant expression. "About snow," she said. "About how I used to hate it because of what happened, but now I think maybe it was necessary. The storm brought me to you, it gave me this life." Gideon kissed her softly. "Everything happens for a reason. I believe that, and I thank God every day for that storm because it brought you to me." The baby came in early March, almost exactly a year after their wedding. Elena labored through the night with Maria, and a midwife from town attending her, and Gideon wearing a path in the floor downstairs with his pacing. When dawn broke and the baby finally arrived, it was with a lusty cry that brought tears of relief to everyone's eyes. "It is a boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy, strong boy." Elena, exhausted but elated, held her son for the first time and fell instantly in love. He had dark hair like both his parents and seemed to have Gideon's nose. He was perfect. When Gideon was finally allowed into the room, he approached the bed like a man in a dream, his eyes fixed on the bundle in Elena's arms. "Come meet your son," Elena said softly. Gideon sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby, and Elena saw tears slide down his cheeks unchecked. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now, looking at her son, Elena knew exactly what he should be called. "Gabriel," she said. "Gabriel Edward Vega." Gabriel means God is my strength, and Edward was my grandfather's name. "Gabriel," Gideon repeated, testing it out. He touched one finger to the baby's tiny hand, and Gabriel gripped it with surprising strength. "Hello, Gabriel. Welcome home, son." The months that followed were exhausting but wonderful. Gabriel was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he brought so much joy to the household that Elena sometimes felt like her heart would burst. Gideon was a devoted father, helping with the baby whenever he could, walking the floor with him at night when he was fussy, singing to him in Spanish songs his own mother had sung. Elena watched her husband with their son and fell in love with him all over again. This strong rancher, this man who could break horses and manage difficult cattle, reduced to complete mush by a baby's smile. It was beautiful to witness. As Gabriel grew, so did the ranch. Gideon's business sense and Elena's careful management of the books allowed them to expand, buying the neighboring property when it came up for sale just as Gideon had hoped. They hired more hands and increased their herd, becoming one of the more prosperous ranches in the region. Thomas married a girl from town, a sweet young woman named Sarah who fit into the family perfectly. Maria remained healthy and active, delighting in her role as grandmother to Gabriel and, in time, to the children Elena and Gideon would have next. When Gabriel was 2 years old, Elena gave birth to twin girls, which Gideon took with good humor despite his claims that daughters would be his undoing. They named them Grace and Hope, and they were beautiful babies with their mother's dark eyes and their father's smile. 3 children, Gideon said one evening as they watched the twins sleep in their cradles while Gabriel played with wooden horses on the floor. Our family is growing. Is it too much? Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. It is perfect. He pulled her close and kissed her. Everything about our life is perfect. You are perfect. Not perfect, Elena corrected with a smile, but happy. So very happy. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named Isaac, then a final daughter named Rose when Elena was 32, giving them 5 children total. The house was indeed full of love and noise and life, just as Elena had dreamed. The children grew up knowing they were wanted and loved, never doubting their place in the family. Gideon proved to be everything Elena had known he would be as a father: patient, loving, firm when needed, but always fair. He taught the boys ranching from the time they could walk, and he insisted the girls learn too, saying that Vega children needed to know the land that was their heritage. He never raised his voice in anger, never made his children feel less than cherished. Elena started her school just as she had wanted, holding classes in a room they added onto the house. Children from neighboring ranches came twice a week to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and Elena discovered she had a gift for teaching. The extra income from the school was put aside for the children's futures, for educations and new starts. As the years passed, Elena sometimes thought about her father and stepmother. She heard through town gossip that their store had eventually failed, that they had left Trinidad for parts unknown. She felt no satisfaction in their failure, only a distant sadness for what might have been if her father had been stronger, if he had chosen his daughter over his second wife. But mostly, she did not think about them at all. Her life was too full of joy to have room for bitterness. She had Gideon, who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. She had her children, each one unique and wonderful. She had Maria, who remained spry and sharp into her old age, and Thomas and Sarah and their growing family. She had this ranch, this land that Gideon's father had loved and that she had come to love just as much. She belonged here, truly and completely. She was part of something good and lasting. One evening when Elena was 35 and had been married for 14 years, she and Gideon took a rare moment alone to ride up to the high pasture, leaving the children in Maria's capable hands. It was spring, and the meadows were carpeted with wildflowers, the air sweet with their scent. They dismounted at the spot where Gideon had proposed all those years ago and stood looking out at the view that never failed to move Elena. The ranch spread below them, the house where their children slept, the pastures where their cattle grazed. Their life built together through hard work and love. "Do you remember the first time I brought you here?" Gideon asked, his arm around her waist. "Of course. You told me I was part of yours, that I was supposed to be part of your life. I was right." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face the way they had that day. You are the best part of my life, Elena. Everything good I have comes from you, our children, our home, our happiness. All of it starts with you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. After 14 years of marriage, he could still make her cry with the depth of his love. "I love you," she said. "I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." He kissed her then, deep and sweet, and Elena thought about the girl she had been, dying in the snow, certain her life was over. That girl could never have imagined this future, this joy. "Thank you," she whispered against his lips. "For what? For finding me, for saving me, for making me yours." Gideon smiled, that full, wonderful smile that still made her heart race. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for choosing me, for building this life with me, for being exactly who you are." They stood together as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The wind was gentle now, carrying the scent of pine and grass and home. In the distance, Elena could hear the faint sound of their children's laughter. She thought about all the moments that had led to this one, the cruelty that had left her to die, the providence that had put Gideon on that road at exactly the right moment, the courage it had taken to let herself love again after betrayal. The years of work and joy and struggle and triumph that had built this life they shared. "What are you thinking?" Gideon asked, a question he had asked her countless times over the years. Elena leaned into his embrace, solid and warm and safe. "I am thinking that I am grateful. For all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me here, to you, to this life. I am thinking that I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "Where is that?" She looked up at him, at this man who had given her everything, who had kept every promise he ever made. "Home," she said simply. "I am home." And she was. After years of feeling lost, of not belonging, of searching for her place in the world, Elena had found it. Not in a location on a map or a house with 4 walls, but in the heart of a good man and in the family they had built together. She was part of something bigger than herself, something that would last long after she was gone, carried forward by her children and their children. She was Elena Vega, wife and mother, teacher and partner. She was loved and needed and valued. She had been abandoned in the snow and left to die, but instead she had been found. She had been saved. And in saving her, Gideon had given her not just life but a reason to live it fully and joyfully. Years continued to pass in the way they do, marked by birthdays and holidays and the everyday moments that make up a life. Gabriel grew into a fine young man, tall and serious like his father, and he took naturally to ranching. At 20, he married a neighboring rancher's daughter and brought her home to the ranch, where she and Elena became close friends. The twins, Grace and Hope, were beautiful and spirited, and they both eventually married good men who loved them. Isaac followed his older brother into ranching, while Rose, the baby, surprised everyone by becoming a teacher like her mother. Elena and Gideon became grandparents, then great-grandparents, watching their family tree spread and grow. Through it all, their love remained constant. They were partners in every sense, working together, facing challenges together, celebrating victories together. When Elena was 52, Maria passed away peacefully in her sleep, and Elena mourned the woman who had been not just a mother-in-law but a true mother to her. At the funeral, surrounded by the huge family that Maria had been so proud of, Elena held Gideon's hand and thought about how much this woman had given her. Acceptance, love, wisdom, and a place to belong. "She loved you like her own daughter," Gideon said quietly as they stood by the grave. "From the very first day, I know. And I loved her like a mother. I was blessed to have her in my life." Thomas, now graying at the temples, put his arm around his brother. "She died happy, knowing her family was strong and united. That was all she ever wanted." They continued on, the rhythm of ranch life providing comfort in grief. The seasons turned, the cattle were driven to market, the crops were planted and harvested, babies were born and grew. Elena's hair turned silver, and lines appeared at the corners of her eyes from years of smiling. Gideon's dark hair went gray, then white, and his hands became gnarled with arthritis, but his blue eyes remained clear and bright. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a huge celebration at the ranch. The house and yard were full of people, 3 generations of Vega family plus friends from all over the region. There was music and dancing and a feast that lasted into the evening. As the sun set, Gabriel stood and proposed a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass. "To the strongest, most loving couple I have ever known. Papa, you taught me what it means to be a man, a husband, and a father. Mama, you showed me that love and courage can overcome anything. Thank you for the example you set, for the home you built, for the family you raised. May you have many more years together." Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. Elena felt tears running down her cheeks, and when she looked at Gideon, she saw he was crying too. 40 years, he said, shaking his head in wonder. It has gone so fast. And yet I remember everything, Elena replied. Every moment, from the day you found me to right now. Every single moment has been a gift. That night, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Elena and Gideon sat on the porch swing as they had done countless times over the years. The stars blazed overhead, eternal and unchanging. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not found you?" Gideon asked quietly. "No," Elena said honestly. "Because I did not have a life before you found me. I was just existing, just surviving. You gave me life, real life. You gave me purpose and joy and love. You gave me everything." "You gave me the same," Gideon said. "I was just going through the motions before you came, working, managing the ranch, but not really living. You taught me what it meant to truly love someone, to build a life with them." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, an owl hooting in the distance, the soft lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through grass. "I would do it all again," Elena said. "Every hard moment, every struggle, all of it, if it meant I ended up here with you." "So would I," Gideon agreed. "Though I wish you had not had to suffer, had not been abandoned like that. But if that was what it took to bring you to me, then I am grateful for it." "Everything happens for a reason," Elena said, echoing words they had spoken many times over the years. "I believe that more now than ever." They continued to sit together, 2 people who had become one through decades of shared life, watching the stars wheel overhead and knowing that whatever time they had left, they would face it together. As they had always done, as they always would. When Elena was 65 and Gideon 69, he fell ill with pneumonia during a hard winter. Elena nursed him through it with fierce determination, refusing to let him leave her. He recovered, but it was a slow process, and he never quite regained all his strength. The running of the ranch was gradually turned over to Gabriel and Isaac, though Gideon still consulted and advised. Elena found she did not mind the slower pace. It gave them more time together, time to just be. They spent long afternoons in the parlor, reading or talking or simply sitting in companionable silence. They took slow walks around the ranch when the weather permitted, Gideon leaning on a cane but still insisting on seeing his land, his legacy. One spring afternoon, nearly 50 years after their wedding, Gideon asked Elena to walk with him up to the high pasture one more time. She was concerned about the exertion, but he insisted, saying he needed to see it one last time. They rode slowly, their horses picking their way carefully up the familiar trail. When they reached the top, Gideon dismounted stiffly and helped Elena down. They stood looking at the view they had admired so many times over the decades. "This never gets old," Gideon said softly. "No matter how many times I see it, it still takes my breath away." "Because it represents everything we built," Elena said. "Our life together, our family, our home." Gideon turned to her and took both her hands in his. His hands were old now, spotted and wrinkled, but still strong where it counted. "Elena Vega, you are the love of my life. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. These 50 years with you have been the greatest blessing of my existence." Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Why does this feel like goodbye, not goodbye?" he said gently. "Never goodbye, but I am getting old, my love, we both are. And I wanted you to know, while I still can say it clearly, how much you mean to me, how much you have always meant to me." "You mean everything to me," Elena said fiercely. "Everything, Gideon. You are my heart." He pulled her close and held her, and they stood together on the mountain as they had so many times before, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. Gideon lived another 5 years, years that were peaceful and full of family. He got to meet 3 more great-grandchildren and see his grandsons take over the full running of the ranch. He was clear-minded until the end, and when he finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at 74, Elena was holding his hand. The grief was crushing, but Elena did not break under it. She had Gideon's strength in her bones now, his love in her heart. She had their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a legacy of love that would continue long after both of them were gone. She lived another 8 years after Gideon's passing, dying at the age of 78, surrounded by family in the house that had been her sanctuary for more than 50 years. Her last words were, "Tell Gideon I am coming home," and she passed with a smile on her face. They buried her next to Gideon on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a tree they had planted together 40 years earlier. On the headstone, their children had carved a simple inscription: "Elena Garrett Vega, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother." She was found in the snow and given a second life. She used it to build a legacy of love. And beside it, Gideon's stone read, "Gideon Edward Vega, beloved husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He found love in a blizzard and cherished it every day of his life." The ranch continued, passed down through generations of Vegas who knew the story of how their family truly began. With a woman dying in the snow and a cowboy who could not ride past someone in need. With a moment of providence that changed everything. With love that was strong enough to overcome betrayal and loss and build something lasting. In the high pasture, where Gideon had first declared his love, wildflowers bloomed every spring in a riot of color. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, when the wind whispered through the grass, and the mountains stood silent and eternal against the sky, it almost seemed like you could hear voices carried on the breeze. A man and a woman, still together, still in love, still grateful for the day their lives collided in a blizzard and changed them both forever. The story of Elena and Gideon Vega became part of the family lore, passed down to each new generation. Their great-great-grandchildren grew up hearing about the woman who was abandoned and the cowboy who saved her, about love that started in tragedy and bloomed into joy. The ranch remained in the Vega family for over 100 years, a testament to what they had built together. And whenever a Vega faced hardship or loss, whenever they felt abandoned or alone, they remembered Elena and Gideon. They remembered that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the beginning of something beautiful. That love can be found in the most unlikely places. That family is not always about blood, but about who chooses you, who stands beside you, who refuses to let you face the cold alone. They remembered, and they were grateful. and they tried to live by the example set by their ancestors, those two people who had found each other in a blizzard and spent the rest of their lives being grateful for it, who had taken what could have been a tragic ending and turned it into a beautiful beginning, who had built a legacy of love that would last for generations. That was the true gift Elena and Gideon left behind. Not just the ranch or the material prosperity, but the knowledge that love could heal anything, that family was everything, and that sometimes being part of someone else's life was the greatest blessing you could receive. Elena had been abandoned in the snow by her family, left to die alone and unloved. Gideon had found her and said, "You are part of mine now." And from that simple claim, that moment of choosing, had come a love story for the ages. A story of redemption and second chances, of finding home in another person, of building a life together that honored the gift of being found. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth living up to. And the Vegas did their best to do exactly that, generation after generation, keeping alive the memory of the couple who started it all, the woman who survived, the cowboy who saved her, and the love that made everything else possible.